thank you very much for your attention today and for allowing me to present this paper online. My presentation is based on my book, which is entitled When Workers Sabotage, in France and United States from 1897 to 1918. And this book has been published in French in 2024, but a translation in English is on work currently. So Sabotage was conceptualized by French anarchist Émile Pouget in the mid-1890s. It was a means of action that took shape outside the sphere of representative democracy. At the time, the institutions of the Third Republic had been stabilized by the constitutional laws of 1875, but anarchists continued to advocate a revolution to bring down the state and capitalism. Their means of action were limited by the laws of 1893 and 1894, designed to repress anarchism. These laws were passed in response to terrorist bombings and attacks by anarchist militants. In the mid-1890s, some militants, like Pouget, sought an intermediate path between terrorist violence and strikes, which had been decriminalized in 1864. Pouget was one of those anarchists who saw trade unionism legalized in 1884 as a way of pursuing their commitment. They continued to reject the parliamentary system and reformism, but were convinced that violence against individuals was a dead end. Inspired by these methods of the British dockers who practiced kakani, a form of work slowdown, Émile Pouget used the French slang term sabotage, meaning sloppy work, to theorize a new tactic. This consisted in putting pressure on bosses by deliberately working badly. The forms of sabotage imagined by Pouget are extremely diverse. They can involve slowing down work, degrading production, or even putting machines out of action. In all cases, it's a question of not respecting the employer's norm of a job well done without endangering human life. This new tactic inspired the militants of the Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, in the United States from 1911 onwards. Although the doctrine of sabotage spread wherever revolutionary syndicalism was active, our analysis is limited to France and the United States, as these were the two countries where an original and internationally influential concept of sabotage was developed. We will analyze the relationship between this particular form of direct action and representative democracy between 1897, when the French General Confederation of Labor, CGT, officially adopted sabotage, and 1918, when the IWW officially renounced sabotage. We will argue that despite appearances, the relationship between sabotage and democracy is not simply one of opposition. From the outset, sabotage has been at the margin of the democratic system embodied by the Third Republic. On the one hand, sabotage can lead to illegal acts, as any infringement of private property is punishable under the French Penal Code. In this respect, sabotage challenges bourgeois legality, in line with the anarchist illegalism of the previous period. On the other hand, the acts of sabotage promoted by Pouget are in line with the continuity of the workers' movement as it has developed since the early 19th century. This tactic was therefore just another weapon available to the working class, which had to continue its emancipatory struggle despite the repression of the 1971 Commune and the establishment of a bourgeois republic. From this point of view, sabotage is therefore democratic insofar as it must serve the interests of the people and enable the emancipation of the working class. For this reason, Sabotage was officially adopted by the CGT at its third Congress in 1897. Sabotage seemed perfectly compatible with the revolutionary syndicalism embodied by the CGT, which defended a particular form of worker democracy within the legal framework of the Third Republic. From the state's point of view, it was not propaganda in favor of sabotage that posed a problem, but the illegal acts it might entail. Illegal acts of sabotage seemed to multiply in the 1900s. Barbershop employees defaced shopfronts in Paris, electricians switched off power, construction workers committed a multitude of acts of damage on building sites, and so on. The situation became even more serious between 1909 and 1911, when hundreds, then thousands of telegraph and telephone wires were cut during and after the postal workers' strikes of 1909 and the railway workers' strike of 1910. This time, sabotage raised fears of disaster and endangered national security. In March 1909, Louis Barthou, Minister of Public Works, described it as a, I quote, national crime. Between 1909 and 1911, successive governments tried to introduce anti-sabotage bills, but none came to fruition due to ministerial instability. These bills were later abandoned as the threat faded after the summer of 1911. During this period of intense conflict, sabotage was denounced by both the government and the major newspapers as a practice inherently incompatible with the democratic system of the Third Republic. In the vast majority of political speeches and press articles, sabotage was associated with violence, even terrorism. It is in the name of democracy that this tactic is condemned, and some call for it to be explicitly punished by the Penal Code. The situation was much the same in the United States, where the French doctrine of sabotage was imported into the IWW in 1911. The Wobblies, who published theoretical pamphlets of sabotage, were very cautious about this tactic. William Haywood, for example, one of the founders of the IWW in 1905, made no mention of telegraph and telephone wire cuts when he returned from his stay in France at the end of 1910. On the ground, however, activists were often more radical, particularly in California, where anarchists were numerous. In 1915, the Wobblies were suspected of burning down entire fields in California. As in France, sabotage was denounced in the press and by local authorities as a tactic akin to terrorism and incompatible with the American democratic system, above all because it threatened private property. What's more, sabotage is seen in the United States as a foreign practice that originated in Europe and more specifically in France. In the conservative press, it is therefore described as an, I quote, un-American practice, contrary to the American democratic spirit. In the Western states in particular, sabotage is severely combated by local authorities. Idaho and Minnesota even passed criminal syndicalism laws in 1917. These measures distinguish between good unionism, which respects the law and the democratic system, and bad revolutionary syndicalism, which advocates violent direct action such as sabotage. The federal government finally intervened against the IWW in the summer of 1917. Strikes led by the Wobblies in the copper mines of Arizona and forests of the Pacific Northwest threatened the war effort. In 1918, around 100 Wobblies were sentenced to prison terms of up to 20 years. The question of sabotage played a decisive role during the federal trial, which lasted 5 months in Chicago between April and August 1918. It was impossible to prove that the militants had committed acts of sabotage to hinder the American war effort, but they were accused of advocating sabotage. This charge, based on pre-war IWW propaganda, plays a major role in the verdict. Its impact is all the greater given that, since 1915, the IWW has also been accused of serving German interests. There is no evidence of such complicity, but the IWW is held responsible for numerous acts of sabotage carried out by German agents on American soil during the period of US neutrality. Sabotage appears here as a weapon against American democracy in the service of the German Empire. The scale of the repression against the IWW explains why the Wobblies officially abandoned sabotage in 1918. This was the price they had to pay to continue to exist in the United States. One might quickly conclude that sabotage is incompatible with the democratic system, whether in France or the US, and that the relationship between sabotage and representative democracy can be reduced to a simple opposition. But the relationship is more complex. First of all, sabotage is not just a form of destructive, illegal direct action. Originally, it was a matter of applying the principle bad pay, bad work, which means adjusting the quality of the work provided to the amount of the wage. According to this definition, sabotage isn't necessarily illegal. It's a perfectly non-violent, non-destructive form of direct action, still referred to today as a slowdown or work to rule. Moreover, sabotage is a refusal to respect the employer's norm of work well done, not the refusal of work well done in itself. This distinction is very important in understanding why, in some cases, sabotage means working better than the boss expects. For example, in 1912, the CGT Building Workers Union adopted, I quote, intelligent sabotage. This sabotage consists in working more slowly and more carefully than usual to extend the duration of building site and make employers lose money. In this case, sabotage is perfectly harmless. It even guarantees that the buildings or tunnels of the Paris metro will be better constructed, despite the many collapses and disasters that occurred at the time, because reinforced concrete techniques were not well mastered, and because unskilled and underpaid workers were hired to complete the work as quickly as possible. Sometimes, therefore, the public can have an interest in sabotage, just as when waiters are invited to serve, I quote, double rations to customers to make their bosses lose money. However, destructive sabotage is also a reality that trade unions organizations cannot ignore. Certain groups of militant radicals appropriated the doctrine of sabotage and developed it into more destructive practices than those imagined by Pouget. In France, the weekly La Guerre Sociale, the social war, founded by revolutionary socialist Gustave Hervé in 1906, ran several campaigns to promote the cutting of telegraph and telephone wires between 1909 and 1911. It even invented the shear family to embody this particular form of sabotage. The weekly had a circulation of up to 60,000, only slightly less than the socialist daily L'Humanité, founded by Jean Jaurès in 1904. In La Guerre Sociale, sabotage is presented as a means of forcing the government and then the railways company to reinstate striking employees who have been dismissed. It is not, therefore, a revolutionary tactic designed to overthrow the government or expropriate private companies, but a means of pressure with precise and limited objectives. What's more, La Guerre Sociale never advocates life-threatening methods. The weekly even distinguishes between intelligent sabotage and, I quote, foolish sabotage. However, the CGT did not support this act of sabotage. Despite its revolutionary doctrine, the Confederation positioned itself as a legal organization in order to continue to exist within the framework of the Third Republic. It did not, however, abandon sabotage, but for the CGT, sabotage is a non-destructive mode of action that enhances the effectiveness of strikes by preventing, for example, scabs from restarting production. In the US, the IWW faced a similar problem. From 1913 onwards, wobblies in the Pacific Coast states began to deviate from the IWW's doctrine of sabotage, advocating more offensive and destructive acts of sabotage. At the time, Western wobblies were suspected of breaking machinery, destroying crops, and burning fields. The IWW head office in Chicago criticized this propaganda and decided to de-emphasize sabotage from 1914 onwards. However, this tactic was not abandoned. The IWW defended a non-destructive conception of sabotage called, I quote, constructive sabotage from October 1917 onwards. In this definition, workers' sabotage becomes a means of building a powerful trade union movement by attracting new members. The IWW and CGT even go so far as to explain that the real and first saboteurs are the capitalists who value their profits over the quality of work. The denunciation of, I quote, capitalist sabotage thus took on an important role in CGT and IWW propaganda before the war. In France, the CGT's fight against capitalist sabotage took the form of campaigns against food fraud, public works defects, and the poor quality of materials used in the construction of warships. French trade unions practiced what they called open-mouth sabotage, revealing to the public the illegal or dangerous practices of their bosses. Sabotage thus became a practice in the service of the public, in no way incompatible with the democratic ideal. Thus, the constructive sabotage advocated by the IWW from October 1917 onwards is defined as a refusal to participate in capitalist sabotage, and thus as a means of serving the interest of the people in an explicitly democratic perspective. I quote here an article of Solidarity, which was the official newspaper of the weekly newspaper of the IWW. Destructive sabotage is being used and will be used as long as repressive measures are taken against organized bodies of men and industrial freedom is denied. It will be used as long as there is no class-conscious organization among the workers. But as the growth of the idea of industrial unionism spreads, as the workers come to a realization of their class interest and the workers are organized into the IWW, the idea of constructive sabotage will take the place of the other distorted form which we have learned from our masters, and our friend Sabkat will be busy making the world a better place to live in now while he is paving the way for industrial democracy. To conclude, I would say that sabotage has been unjustly reduced in collective representations to its destructive and dangerous dimension for the public. However, sabotage has given rise to a multitude of practices, some of which were non-destructive and beneficial to the public. In reality, sabotage has been much richer and more diverse than the definition that prevails today. Its conceptualization can be summarized as follows. Émile Pouget gave a new definition to the word around 1895. The CGT officially adopted sabotage in 1897, and then two major conceptions of sabotage clashed. On the one hand, the non-destructive sabotage defended by the CGT which at the same time denounced capitalist sabotage. On the other, the destructive sabotage championed by La Guerre Sociale, which nonetheless advocates intelligent sabotage that harms no one. In the United States, the IWW was directly inspired by the doctrine of sabotage developed by Puget, but left aside the destructive sabotage defended by La Guerre Sociale. However, some militants in the West developed their own conception of destructive sabotage before the central leadership in Chicago promoted constructive sabotage. From the militants' point of view, all these forms of sabotage, even the most destructive, are democratic, insofar as they are a means of action to establish a more egalitarian society, or even a socialist system rid of private property and bourgeois state. From the point of view of their opponents, sabotage is inherently anti-democratic, illegal, and violent. The CGT and IWW have tried to adapt sabotage to the democratic and legal framework, promoting only non-destructive forms of sabotage designed to increase the effectiveness of strikes in particular. But even this very limited, harmless form of sabotage has been eradicated in France and the US. Does this mean that worker sabotage has been totally and definitively marginalized in these two countries? This is doubtful, given the evolution of legislation in the US and Europe concerning whistleblowers who practice a modern form of open-mouth sabotage. Thank you for your attention.
Dominique, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I'm curious about Grand Juan's special issue from L'Assiette Aubert on sabotage. Could you tell me more about the content of the issue?
Yeah. So this is about this one, right?
Yes.
Sorry, this one. Okay. Yeah. This issue was published when bakery workers in Paris were on strike, and one of the syndicalists of the CGT, his name was Amédée Bousquet. He was one of the leader of the CGT at these times. Published an article in the CGT newspaper, which was entitled La Voix du Peuple, the people voice. And he published an article entitled We Must Sabotage. And he explained that bakery workers could sabotage the ovens, for example, by putting some gasoline in the oven to make the bread toxic. But the aim of this action was not to poison people. It was to make this bread with no value. The aim of Bousquet was to have a bread that no one would want to buy because it would smell gasoline, or it would be totally burnt. And the aim of this sabotage was to attack the bosses by making this bread unbuyable. And this article made a great scandal in Paris in 1905 because the CGT was accused to poison people and to murder people with toxic bread and so on. And L'Assiette Aubert here, it was an anarchist weekly in Paris at that time. It was very popular. It was a weekly with only pictures, cartoons with no article in it. It was a satirical publication. Make here L'Assiette au beurre makes fun of this scandal, and it says you are afraid of the CGT, of the sabotage of the bakery workers, but the real saboteurs are the bosses, because the bosses in the bakeries at the time put a talc powder in the bread, or made a lot of fraud to increase their profits at the same time. So this is an issue that is very representative of the campaign of the CGT against capitalist sabotage, because at that time CGT defend itself by saying we are not the real and the first saboteurs. The real and the first saboteurs are the capitalists, and this is a joke about this campaign.
Hi, Dominic, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So in the last part of your presentation, you mentioned whistleblowing as an act of or as a tactic of sabotage. And I just have a question, or I would like to hear your opinion about this, because I'm from Senegal, by the way. I'm Sahna. And in Senegal, a law was recently introduced to protect whistleblowers. And my question is, if whistleblowing was initially framed as an act of sabotage, what does it become as a tactic once it's legally protected? Like, does it effectiveness or radical potential change, or how can we consider this transition from being a tactic to basically protected by law? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, I think we can see whistleblowing as a modern form of sabotage, because the syndicalists in France and in the US, even amongst the Wobblies, practiced what they called open mouth sabotage. In French, we say le sabotage de la bouche ouverte. It's the same thing, open mouth sabotage. It consisted in saying publicly what the capitalists, what the bosses, what the governments really did, even if it was illegal or fraud, or like these bakery owners by putting talc powder in the bread. So this particular form of sabotage, open mouth sabotage, is, to my mind, one of the only forms of sabotage that did not disappear. And it did not disappear, and it even became legal by the new legislation of whistleblowing. And I think that this change doesn't change anything of the nature of the sabotage, because it is still a form of sabotage when you denounce publicly what your boss or what your administration does, when you denounce some illegal act committed by your boss or your administration, it can be seen as a form of sabotage, which became legal. Of course, all of whistleblowing actions are not sabotage. because when you say something publicly about some illegal action of a state or a big company, it's not always a form of sabotage. But I think there some of whistleblowing action are. The only difference between open mouth sabotage and modern whistleblowing actions is that in the 1900s, the open mouth sabotage consisted in denouncing some illegal acts of the bosses to defend yourself or to defend the working class. It was a means of action, a revolutionary means of action to defend the interest of the working class. Today, whistleblowing action are more in the name of public interest, general interest, democratic ideal, etc. The class, the working class dimension of open mouth sabotage has disappeared.
I'll have to stop you here because we went 2 or 3 minutes over, if that's okay. I'm not sure whether you could hear me. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's have a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.